really. No.
Oh, okay. No comment. Okay.
We have to get my stuff too quick. That's the trick. So you have to go on the phone easily.
So everyone is coming forward and finding their place. Good evening, everyone. I want to thank you for being here this evening for this event that Union is very, very honored to be hosting. We, as of last year on Earth Day, begin with a land acknowledgement for all of our events. So I want to first say that Union Theological Seminary acknowledges and honors the land on which this building stands as the homeland and the territory of the Lenape people, as well as the habitat and dwelling place of the many beings they have been in relationship with. We give thanks to all the spirits of nature. We pay respect to the Lenape people, past, present, and future, and express support for the flourishing of indigenous people and lifeways within this place and everywhere. I know for many of you, this may be your first time at Union Theological Seminary, and I'm very happy that in the dark of night you were able to find your way up here, even though I hear the one line has been down for a while, so intrepid people you are. Thank you for coming. For those of you who don't know anything about Union, we're a 187-year-old seminary. We were founded by a group of Presbyterians from Connecticut and New Jersey who decided that you couldn't do good theological education in the quiet of the countryside. You needed the roar of the city in your ears to hear God. So they founded this seminary, and since they started it on the docks in what is now downtown New York, that roar has been flowing through this space. And yet again, that delightful, powerful roar in all of its forms comes to us in the poetry that we are going to be listening to and celebrating this evening. It is such an honor for us to have here with us Micheal O'Siadhail, who is a great friend to me and to this place. He is also, I should say, in addition to being a great friend, a gifted poet, which is a very small way to describe the magnitude of what Micheal has done. We have had a chance to get to know him over the years, and we're also very happy to have Christina Welts, his spouse, here with us. He was born and raised in Ireland, educated at Trinity College Dublin and the University of Oslo. His collected poems were published in 2013, and there's so much more I could say. I'm abbreviating this evening. One Crimson Thread was published in 2015 by Blood Axe Books, and the 5 Quintets in 2018 by Baylor University Press. He's received the Irish American Cultural Institute Award, the Martin Toonler Prize, and honorary doctorates from Manitoba, Aberdeen University, Trinity College Dublin, and the list goes on. The 5 Quintets received the Conference on Christianity and Literature Book Award in 2018, and an Eric Hoffer Award in 2020. And a book of essays, Say But the Word, Poetry as Vision and Voice, was published in 2015. A brilliant discussion of poetry and vision. He is a member of the Arts Council of the Republic of Ireland and on the Advisory Committee of Cultural Relations, a founding member of, I'm going to say this, O'Siadhail, an eclectic body of outstanding, how do you say it? Ístana, an outstanding body of Irish artists, and he is also the former editor of Poetry Ireland Review. And he's the founding chairman of ILE, the Ireland Literary Exchange. Very happy to also have with us this evening, let me see the next piece of my, getting my papers all confused here. We are also very happy to have with us this evening Jerry White. Jerry White is a spiritual activist. We need more spiritual activists. And I would put Micheal in that category too through his poetry, who leads the United Religions Initiative, the world's largest grassroots interfaith network active in over more than 100 countries. Based in Washington, D.C., Jerry is known for leading high-impact campaigns, 3 of which led to international treaties, including the Mind Ban Treaty and the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. A trauma survivor who lost his leg to a landmine in Israel, Jerry worked closely with the late Princes of Wales. He shares the 1997 Nobel Peace Prize awarded to the international campaign to ban landmines. He's also a professor at the University of Virginia, and his new book comes out this month, Religicide, Confronting the Roots of Anti-Religious Violence, Religicide. So I'm very happy to welcome our 2 guests this evening, and in particular, our prestigious, humble, brilliant, warm, worldly, honest, vulnerable, extremely present, and beyond the realms of articulate into the realm of the transcendent as it touches words, Micheal O'Siadhail. Thank you, Micheal, for being here.
Thank you so much. I wish that last string of adjectives belonged to me. But my mother's not here. She would have felt a little competitive. So, yeah, I'm not normally nervous about speaking. I'm also an Irishman, or half Irish, born outside Boston. But today, in such a beautiful place with those high words of praise and someone I admire totally in Micheal, I'm, a little nervous. How do you introduce an Irish poet of his stature? But I'm so glad that you all came, because I think we all need poetry these days. And we need deep poetry and metaphor and song and lyrics and celebration in the face of so much shadow in the world. So I think we've come to the right place to be inspired. And then the nerve, the chutzpah, to take the Hebrew scriptures and the Psalms and then the Greek New Testament and do a spin on it and go deeper and higher and farther, perhaps, for our modern ears. How amazing is that? I mean, what courage and confidence and skill it takes to share what you've shared with us in Testament, Micheal. So for that, I'm truly grateful. So as I speak, I'll be weaving in some of his words, not in his voice. You'll get the real reading later. I'm just like a teaser, like sort of the warm-up band, I would say. But I just want to sort of confess this sort of anxiety and PTSD, because the last time I was asked to actually introduce someone at a book party, it was Her Majesty Queen Noor of Jordan in Los Angeles. And there I was, waiting to introduce like the main event. So no one knew who Forrest Gump or Jerry White was. They just knew that Bono was in the house. Some people called him Bono because they really didn't know, but they were all excited. So I was supposed to introduce Bono, who then was going to introduce Her Majesty Queen Noor of Jordan, with her memoirs being made available called Leap of Faith. And so again, I'm like I am today, just sort of rattling on, very prosaic, droning, a little heavy-handed, American accent, nothing like an Irish accent. And so when I was done, basically Bono like grabbed the mic from my hand, let's confess, and just began like a lyrical tribute to Her Majesty, calling Her Majesty his light, because Nur means light, and the Rose of Jordan. And then, I'm surprised he didn't break out into song, but like I was schooled, sat down, and I didn't need to be in the reception line. I mean, Her Majesty was so happy, and Bono was brilliant. So now I'm in this, I have no idea why I'm in the same situation again, maybe bad karma, that I have to introduce and go before an Irish poet of such gifts. Much better than Bono, by the way. I mean, you'll hear, I'm not sure if he sings, but he's been... So when I think of some of the words that have come out of the Testament, I would just start, with some of the sadness when we think of Micheal's take on Psalm 150. How can humankind now thrive unless evolving we mature? Greed commands. Lust for power discounts creation's weak or frail. Those who have still want it all. One we stand, split, we fall. We cannot be allowed to fail. We've reached our own 11th hour. Indeed, we have, Micheal, and you are indeed prophetic, and the way you use the Psalms challenges us. These cries to God, the cries out of our pain, the cries from the planet and the earth, the cries from the indigenous people on which we built over and at which we now honor hundreds of years later. So I want to just sort of weave a few thoughts into how Micheal, I thought this might be a little bit of like Irish hyperbole, so that perhaps he's like the Caravaggio on the page, meaning his work of words explores, like Caravaggio, shadow and light. And that's where art becomes so brilliant, when someone is the master of shadow and light. So the Psalms, of course, do that well, and he has the confidence of Caravaggio to start sketching on the page with these dark themes and light themes. So as we look about the shadows of today, I jump to the Testament when he's covering Gabriel's, the archangel's approach to Mary. And I'm thinking to ourselves, like, I haven't read this story in a while. Of course, around Christmas time in December, we maybe rehear it. I've heard versions, but for some reason, Micheal made me listen again. So I'm no Gabriel in the Testament, but let's say you're appearing to Mary and you say, "Rejoice, you gracious one, the Lord is with thee. The Lord is with you." And later assuring Mary, "Hey, be not afraid." So it's interesting in the turn of phrase that Micheal used, Angel Gabriel later says to Mary, "The Spirit's power will overshadow you." And it just sort of stopped me of like the shadow again, the use of that, being overshadowed by something divine, something greater than ourselves, but also something ominous, something coming. So perhaps that applies to us here today, that we all are being overshadowed, dare I say overwhelmed, by much of the sadnesses we see around the world and man's inhumanity to man, and man's inhumanity to children and women and wombs and earth. The list goes on. So this is a painful time of rebirthing, let's say in Mary's case, Christ consciousness, in a world that's very troubled. So as you heard, I'm coming out with a book. I work in very depressing topics. It's either like disability or mass destruction or death. And the happy book that was referenced is called Religicide, Confronting the Roots of Anti-Religious Violence. And I've been working in this space of genocide meets ecocide meets what I call factocide. The lies, the digital disinformation, the words and the sounds that we eat every day that are confusing us all. And when you have genocide and ecocide and factocide joining together, as religiously motivated violence, we call it religicide. And it's the fastest growing type of violence in the world today. Most violence around the world has been going down over the last several decades, but this religion-related one is accelerating and going off the charts. And you might say, well, of course, religion is the reason why we all fight. It's the largest cause of conflict in the world. And that's conventional wisdom, and it's simply false and not based in any research or understanding. Normally, wars and conflict and violence are over rather secular issues like power, competition, territory, etc. So that's why we'll be careful to call it not religious violence, but religion-related, or maybe religiously motivated violence in the world today. So think of the stories you already know, the shadow, or being overshadowed by the Shoah, the Holocaust. That's one of the most awful religicides in the world. It was the murder of religion and its followers and its temples and its books and its people and its habitat. It's trying to wipe out a religion, Judaism, and the Jews off the map. And then we look in our day, we wonder, what would we do if we were alive during Nazi Germany? Surely we'd be righteous Gentiles, right? Surely we'd hide people in our basement, our attic, and show our bravery. And it's not a shame, it's just a fact that no, we'd be sitting here. We'd be having a latte with sugar-free vanilla, or we'd be chatting away or doing what we do daily, while several regicides, genocides take place today. The Uyghurs in China, the Rohingya in Myanmar, ongoing, the Yazidis in Iraq, indigenous populations around the world, including what I would call a religicide in slow motion in America, happening over hundreds of years. So this is sort of the shadow world that maybe the Spirit overshadows with the announcement that Mary is going to give birth to Christ consciousness. So then we look at the side of religicide that we called ecocide, the attack on the planet, on our mother, Earth. Micheal, again, prophetic and powerful. Oh God, what fools we are who scar your earth and wound a planet's bone and flesh, unraveling rashly mesh by mesh, a habitat's intricateness, creation's own complex finesse. Oh God, what fools we are who scar. So we must look in the mirror and say, like, who's scarring and who are the fools here? And think for a bit, not with a judgment, but looking ourselves in the face and looking the shadow of evil in the face, not for a pep talk or any easy solution, but to think about the depths of darkness that we live in and that we face on the world today and the scars on our planet. So when I think of the indigenous tribute in indigeneity, there is that, same in great religions like you'll see in Judaism as well, this idea that we live now at our best by looking back 7 generations, mindful of our ancestors, and then looking forward and planning our behavior based on 7 generations ahead for our offspring over the coming generations. And again, Micheal's work with the Psalms, 66, beseeches us, sojourning between each forebearer and heir, show us your caretakers how to care. So how do we care in the face of what some call compassion fatigue? Well, in truth, compassion does not fatigue. It breaks open our hearts. It cries tears. We flow feeling of blood, sadness, deep grieving. And it challenges us to say, well, what do we do about all this? It's tempting to preach in a place like this. I'm not trying to. It's about getting moving. And again, Micheal's testament reminds us that rascal rabbi, what was his name again? Jesus? Yeshua? Joshua? That this guy, this rabbi, really knew tough love. So as we move to the second part of Testament and see in the book this call to the paralytic man who's been lying on the ground. This has always struck me, but it struck me again in Micheal's words and his voice. Stand up. Take up your mat and walk. We do not know the ill man's name. Infirm for 38 maimed years to aid him through his slow and lame. Then comes the one who doesn't balk, this crazy Jesus guy, and he asks if he wishes to be whole. Do we wish to be whole? What struck me in this was I had never noticed before, but it came out from Micheal, 38 years. And I think to myself, like, wait a minute. I was 20 when I got injured and stepped on a landmine and lost my leg, and so I've been 38 years maimed. And I remember being in that hospital room, and I remember the weeks of pain, 6 months in a hospital in Israel after stepping on a landmine. And I remember the day when the nurse came in, it's time to get you out of bed after weeks of having to be bathed and shaved in bed, dealing with the amputations and the surgeries. And she taught me for the first time how to sort of scooch out of bed and get in the wheelchair, which was extremely painful. I was very tired and exhausted, sweating through the process, thinking like, phew, that's a day's work. And I get in the wheelchair and I think, oh, it's about lunchtime. She's going to push me down on my first visit to the hospital cafeteria. Yeehaw. And nothing happens. And this Israeli nurse looks down at me and smiles and says, if you want to move, push. I always laugh at that, like Israeli tough love. But yeah, what does this mean? As the story goes, the man does stand up, pick up his mat, and start to walk again. Micheal says, at once the invalid is strong, takes up his mat, and walks away. And interestingly, all of this takes place on the Holy Sabbath. Is that a good thing? It's breaking the law. You're not supposed to heal on the Sabbath. You're not supposed to be running around. But it strikes me that that's an important detail. To get moving in the world that we face of shadow today, we must break rules. The UN isn't doing it. Nation states aren't governing themselves. And we are all afraid of our own shadows, let alone these systemic shadows that are massacring millions of people around the world. So I know it sounds a little low. I'm trying to set a low bar of depression before you get your inspiration. So I'll end with this idea that we all must put our resources at the table and bring some generosity to this feast of poetry. And yeah, in the Testament it says, in sign, how many loaves have you got? Go and look. A boy's 2 fish and 5 loaves Jesus took, and then, giving thanks, he could feed all the mass who'd followed him and sat then on the grass. So what can you and I give? What can we offer? What do we bring to the table? So before leading, I think the Psalms are a tough plea for sort of earthly redemption, personal redemption, and the redemption of the suffering. So I'm starting you on the sad part, but in Psalm 89, according to Micheal's interpretation, lifting our hearts and our eyes to God, it says, your wide world we so begrime, stumbling towards our own abyss. God, forgive our avarice. Bring us down to earth in time. So I've probably massacred Micheal's lovely verse, and I turned it into a bit like Proverbs instead of poetry, I fear. Like I said, I'm no Bono, but I hope this served as a warm-up act and band for my dear friend and hero, the great poet, Micheal O'Siadhail.
played rugby once. So I want to say thank you so much for your generous words, Jerry, and for your beautifully thought through words. I'm very, very grateful. And thank you for coming to New York to do this. I also want to thank Serene Jones, the president of Union Theological Seminary, for very kindly hosting us here. And I also want to mention your right hand, Thomas Arbuckle, who did so much to organize this evening. So thank you too, Thomas. I also want to thank my publishers, Baylor University Press, for producing yet another beautiful book for me. And finally, I want to thank you all for coming, because without you being here, there's no celebration. So thank you so much for coming and making the effort to be here to celebrate with me. Now, I've always been fascinated by science. I love the magnificent discoveries, evolution, the extraordinary subatomic world, the realms of quasars and black holes. But I think for some, these discoveries all inhibit any sense of transcendence. I've got to say it's the opposite for me. I find this increases my amazement, my wonder at how the world works, it just astonishes me, and certainly increases my need for the transcendence rather than inhibiting it. So, and I love the idea too of how creation somehow has trusted itself in its unfolding. O impresario of trust, O maestro of the bang, as 13 billion years ago you throw desire's half-loaded dice. How dense your word ballooning out, a span of universe, expansive love's intense cocoon, dilating since the burst began. Your cloud of elements converge, appeased by gravity. From dust's own dark ingredients, you gather stars in galaxies. See how the world you've slung now spins to loop its yearly sun, and how our own frail life begins, the carbon in primordial soup. Was this a dice's randomness, or love's known probabilities, that in your image would make man, to whom you'll send back Noah's dove? O impresario of trust, you see me seeing you, and steward of your love you know, I trust you as you've trusted me. Many of you are friends or know me personally and will probably know that 9.5 years ago I suffered an extraordinary loss, a heartbreaking loss. And then I have been so blessed since. Who dwells in dust for your sake, awake and sing, be delighted. You blighted hope, broke me down, revoking joy, brought love to dust. You fought me off, turned away, I yearned for you, hidden God. Unbidden love you reveal, renewing me by surprise. My cries you hear from on high, how I can love you explore. You core me out, daring God. Prepare in me second love's unreckoned depths. Hew in me what you again fill with hope. The thrill of love honed by loss, atoned for all undergone. My wonderful late light bliss relates a psalm's glowing trust. He going out weeps and sows, re-reaps delight, bearing sheaves. And just one from the second section of Testament, which is Gospel. It's this retelling of Gospel stories. A sort of for me, it's an appropriation of them. They're stories I have known all my life. but I somehow found by meditating on them, by retelling them, I could make them my own. So, a brief retelling of the story of Zechariah, the priest, whose wife Elizabeth is the mother of John the Baptist and a cousin of the Virgin Mary. Zechariah. Red letter day only once in his life, as righteous Zechariah the priest is let offer incense. His whole world's upset when told how Elizabeth, his barren wife, will bear a son and they must name him John. Filled with the Spirit, never drinking wine, he will be great before our God, a sign bringing joy and gladness from now on. And in Elijah's power and spirit go before the Lord. He doubts the things he hears. An old man, my wife well on in years, how can I know, he asks, that this is so? With doubts and fears this priest is overcome. Could all this happen to a son of his? In disbelief now Zechariah is, until the day these things occur, struck dumb. In time a son is born and mercy shown, as God has heard Elizabeth's aged plea, and Zechariah has his eyes to see what if he had not doubted, he'd have known. Elizabeth will name him John, but none before was John. This flouts their naming right. But still dumbfounded, let the father write whatever name he wants now for his son. Before the angel, he had been nonplussed. Was pregnant silence Zechariah's pace? His name is John. The Lord has shown a grace, and letters dare what words had feared to trust. Luke's gospel tells how this would so amaze all there as God unfolds what he decreed. A mouth is opened, a tongue is freed, undamned, a muteness overflows in praise. And finally, before getting back to the party, I'm going to read one more, which is very much in the tradition of Psalms of Praise. Hand down the theme, but make it seem it's ours to make our own, our leitmotif to intercede. Take up the tune as we commune, a follower our lead, on beat and in the zone. But past a phrase, we'll each amaze with what's unplanned yet sure, a solo line can't show a doubt. In wordless prayer of jazz we dare like children to cry out, so what's within emerges pure. No chance to sham, our time to jam and give your theme full range. Let each of us in turn obsess enough to soar beyond before and show in playfulness your endless appetite for change. No note foretold, let riffs unfold and in the groove allow the unpredicted to astound. Under your eyes, we improvise democracies of sound to praise you in the jazz of now. Thank you.